Hello, my name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight my guest is Mr. John Kelly. Mr. Kelly's been coming on for some years. I always appreciate that he's a pinch hitter. Actually, my other guest didn't show up, so you're my only guest today. Thanks for coming on, John.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate
glad
it.
to be here.
We were talking before the show, and I wasn't going to discuss this topic, but it seems like you're a little bit of an expert on it, regarding the alleged police brutality that's been going on in the United States, particularly against young black males. Obviously, there is a movement, Black Lives Matter, which infers that black lives don't matter based upon the abuse of police. What do you think, John? You're obviously a journalist and you're an activist. Mm-hmm. You've been involved in social service organizations, I believe, in Michigan and
here
and Texas. What do you think? I mean, I was telling you my experiences of a relative that from a very pious family who just kind of went crazy as a police officer and caused some scandal in a small town. And what is the problem? Is it the unions? Is it the fact that they're protected by the civil service union? Is it that they're picking a particular profile? Do people get jaded as police officers the longer they're there? I believe you stated that you think it might be a psychological profile of people who want the job. What's the issue? What's going on? Or is there a problem and it's just always been going on?
I think it's a combination of factors, Mark. First of all, people are attracted to being a police officer. Usually have a pretty strong sense of right and wrong. And as you know from doing criminal law, the world's not black and white.
No, that's right.
Okay, and so you have people attracted to have real strong, kind of somewhat rigid values usually. They get them into training. They do not get enough training about the psychology of the people they're dealing with or their own things that they may go through as a police officer. They get some, but I think it's pretty minimal. I know that here we had police officers that really don't have a lot of training in crisis intervention to de-escalate situations without violence. At one time, I believe every officer received training on crisis intervention training. And when I was on the board at the Behavioral Health Center a couple of years ago, we were fighting to get 20 officers a year trained, which is, minuscule out of, I think, over 400 officers. So, we're putting people out there on the street that don't have a lot of the training to deal with the mental health and substance abuse and other issues that we're dealing with, plus additional guns on the street. And then a lot of police departments are understaffed, overworked. I know we have short shifts here from time to time. If somebody's sick, they can't cover. They don't have enough officers. So the stress on officers is pretty high. And there's not a really strong system within the department, I don't believe, or any department, most departments in the United States, to support officers in the day-to-day trauma that they might deal with. Then you add to that, you've got basically a situation where you're going to have older officers are hopefully able to guide officers and provide a lot of that support, but there's no real formal structure. The second thing that you have happening is everybody has prejudices. Everybody. All of us have prejudices. Now, and if you're
maybe
I'm
those
not
are opinions.
excusing it.
Well, I don't know if
Okay.
you may be using the word prejudice kind of loosely. It may be opinions.
Well,
I mean,
you may be prejudiced against conservatives. I tend to be, but everybody has their prejudice. It's not limited. That's
what I'm saying.
It's not limited to color.
Let's say that I make some. I'll never forget. A friend of mine said years ago. I said Republicans are mean people.
Right.
That's a generalization.
It's a gross generalization. Right.
You know what he said? And Democrats are lazy people.
Right.
I don't know. There might be some degree of validity in both those opinions.
There's some degree of validity to any opinion, but
yes.
Anecdotal stuff doesn't, a whole make.
Yes.
So I think that's the issue. But what I'm saying is that we all have we have some prejudices in our society that are more acceptable to society in general than others. Okay, if cops started pulling over redheaded people, and several of them got killed disproportionately to other people, that would come to a screeching halt fairly quickly because there's no generalized prejudice against redheaded people. But in our culture, in our institutions, in our society, we do have built-in historical prejudice against blacks, Hispanics, gays, to women to some degree. We also have it to other groups too, just not as a big a measure. And
I don't know. I don't know. Let me tell you something. I think I'm not certain if you come across as a honest, straight, hardworking heterosexual male, if you don't experience some degree of discrimination by some of the groups that you're talking about.
Everybody gets
because
gives
then they're
discrimination.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, everybody gets and gives some discrimination.
Because, right, you're seen, as a threat. You're seen as an assertive or alpha male, and I think there's a degree.
Right. But there's a
backlash against
But the thing that happens is, let me put it this way. If I were to say, and part of discrimination is fear. That's always the engendering thing of discrimination. If I say, okay, if you're walking down the street and you're walking up and there's a young white man walking towards you, or a young Hispanic man, or a young black man, rate your fear on each one of these. If people are honest, we know what is perceived, what is projected by our media and our culture.
Well, there may be objective criteria to back up the fact that black males, young black males, have a higher crime rate than young white males or elderly white males or elderly black males.
The point is not all young black males.
No, absolutely not. But that's right.
And we can't treat people because of those with the incidents all the same. We can't do that, and we have to deal with that in our culture and our society. And let me ask you this: what color do you want to be if you're stopped by a cop at night?
Well, I would agree that. I mean, it depends on the city.
That's the question.
It depends on the city too.
Not much, but
well, I think it does. I mean, I think in some cities where there's like in Corpus Christi, I'm guessing that there's not a high degree of prejudice.
You're right.
Against young black males
areas,
because there's not a high black male population.
Well, it's not only that.
There's not a big ghetto environment.
We just had a black police chief that was well loved and respected and liked here.
By a lot of people.
And it was very, but as a community, the community attitude towards him and how he worked was good for the community, I think, in terms of a lot of things. It was beneficial, whether you agreed or disagreed with individual actions he did or not. I had problems with Troy Riggs. Everybody loved Troy Riggs. I had some real issues with Troy Riggs. But I do think that they made major changes.
I hope they get a good guy this time.
I do too. I think they made major changes in the culture of the police department from where it was under under our past Pete, what's his name, remember? And our Chief Smith. Morale was horrible. The policing was horrible and deteriorating.
What was the name of the police chief?
After scandal.
What was the name of the police chief that proposed to his wife at Whataburger Stadium?
Chief Smith. I wrote a number of articles on him. He was also a good friend of the fake lawyer. What's his name?
Mauricio Celis.
Mauricio Celis. Yes. Yeah. And the naked Mauricio Celis incident.
Well, I think and it's probably my fault. We digressed. And so, what are the other major factors, real quick, that you think are attributing to the, assuming there's a real problem in the abuse of young black men? So, what are the other problems that you see?
Well, I think that along with a lack of training and support for police officers, for dealing with psychological issues, dealing with violent issues, dealing with normal people who are particularly in a particular situation where they're bent out of shape. You can have a fairly normal person get pretty irrational at times. You don't have to be mentally ill.
Absolutely.
So I mean, having a police officers.
Did you follow the? I'm sorry. You go finish.
Well, let me put it this way: if you're a cop without a gun in England, how much better you think you have skills in that area than if you're carrying a gun and a stun gun on top of that?
I agree. One thing that I wanted to say is, did you follow this issue regarding the young black teenager? I believe she was 15 years of age, who was drug out of her seat and thrown across the room by this big burly police officer.
Yes.
I mean, I think most people would agree that he acted inappropriately. Would you?
He should be prosecuted
For assault?
for assault. Yes. Mark, I worked in 15 years in the school systems. I taught alternative ed to kids that were all thrown out of the regular schools. I taught special education, in particular behavioral intervention for the kids who were emotionally disturbed enough they couldn't be in a regular classroom. And out of 15 years, I had to restrain, which means take them around from the back and hold them until they calm down, 2 children, one of who had hit me. Okay? So this guy is totally out of line. I don't care what that kid did. It has nothing to do with her, the way she was assaulted.
What should he have done?
Well, I think the appropriate thing to do is, if it was that serious a situation.
Well, we know this. I think the situation. Excuse me. Let's assume the situation as it was presented, that she was on the phone.
Right.
Put your phone away. I won't put
Right.
it away. You know, and
Right.
then I'm just going to sit here and
That
go.
was a system failure, not just by the cop, but by the teacher and the administrator. Nobody said, and this is part of the whole problem, I think, of putting cops in schools to start with, because it changes the whole attitude about
It would seem
discipline
that
and
way,
intervention and how we deal with kids. Nobody asked this child what was going on. You know, in worst case scenario, you say, if you're the administrator, you say, Mr. Teacher, I'd like you to take your kids, go down the hallway, leave me here with Miss So-and-so. Well, I talk to her one-on-one.
You know, when you're speaking, and I'm not going to ask you about your religious beliefs or whatever. It's almost as if
I have no religious beliefs.
It's almost as if
I have belief in a higher power, but I don't have any religion.
it's almost as if the Republicans see the world as good or bad, black and white, and you know, evil or good. But the Democrats or the left believes we could solve these problems through education, through social welfare spending, through classes and education. And I don't think the right necessarily believes that, as you're saying, training, etc., is going to be effective. So I think there's a major
well, the right believes
dichotomy.
believes in a Darwinian solution.
There's a lot of truth in that.
You throw everybody off of welfare. You throw
I know.
no public
That's
education,
true.
no Social Security. Everybody's on their own, which means the rich and their young survive, and everybody else dies.
And so and
pretty
I do
simple.
think I would agree that social Darwinism is not in line with Christian beliefs.
Nor is it a democracy.
You know, to believe the strongest survives, and that and should survive.
Right.
It's not in accordance with Christian beliefs, but it is their belief.
That's right.
So you think it was a failure of the system?
Yeah, because that should have never escalated to that point. It came out later that this girl had just lost her parents and been placed in foster care. Pretty traumatic event for a child. You know, and what do you say on the right wing blog? Why this girl should comply? And what really gets me about that is they're always saying that the public education system is all about making people comply, and that's why they don't want to be part of it. Yet in this instant, when the public education system says comply, they're all against it, which is really kind of funny.
Well, one thing, and I had this argument thought out. I don't know that I remember it. But they're always saying, the right is always saying, well, look, he reached for a gun. We thought he was reaching for a gun. Mm-hmm. Oh, he hit the cop. Mm-hmm. They're always looking for these excuses, right?
Right.
And I don't know that should that be the subject. Should that be the media subject?
No.
Oh, that is the excuse. Well, I don't know. I don't know that right.
That tells we have no professional standards for police officers.
And the left the left is always saying that it's a problem of racism. It's racism or it's these excuses.
Well,
maybe it's not. I don't know that it's either one.
Well, one of the things the right didn't do in this case with this young lady, if you look at what's going on Facebook and stuff, none of them are printing what the sheriff who fired him said. And the sheriff who fired him said, this is totally unacceptable. This is not within policy. He's being fired for that. Furthermore, that we are glad that citizens took videos of it, and we hope that citizens will continue to video it, because if a police officer is doing the right thing, he has nothing to fear. He says
You know,
we need the citizenry to police our behavior.
There was either an FBI or a CIA study that I had. Was it FBI study that was never really revealed, that stated in the 80s that many white supremacists were joining the police forces,
That's
and that was
and
going
they,
to
and
and
the
that was
military
going
as
to
well.
result in long-term social problems. Are you familiar with that? So I've never heard. I mean, that's not publicly discussed.
No, but there is a vein of, not in all police departments and not necessarily widespread, but there is a vein of white supremacism in some departments. That's pretty well known.
But you know, when everyone says we got to hire so many blacks or something on these police forces, this is this issue regarding external diversity that I've talked about on this show, and I never hear it talked about. So you get Condoleezza Rice. Oh, Condoleezza Rice, she's black, but she represents corporate America.
Yeah.
So the idea, I'm going to hire externally diverse people. If you hire a black man like Dr. Ben Carson, if he were a cop, I don't know.
God forbid.
I don't know. If you have a fascist mentality,
Right.
whether you're Dr. Ben Carson or whoever,
Right.
it doesn't make any difference if you're
Right.
black, right?
No. I think...
And I'm not saying, I'm stating extremes. I don't know that he has a fascist mentality. I'm not very impressed with him at all,
No.
but just to state an extreme.
Yeah.
But, we do have these quota systems that's what they go by.
Well, really, quotas are not a big deal anymore. I would say, I would bet you money that if you looked at the hiring over at the Corpus Christi Police Department, that if there is a quota, they surpass it on their own. What they've done, what quotas did, was they changed the mentality within most of these places, and the quotas are basically not an issue anymore because we hire more blacks and Hispanics than the quotas ever required. It was getting those first people into the organization to break that culture. And once that door was broken and they found out, hey, guess what? Blacks and Hispanics can be just as good at cops as anybody else, then it didn't become an issue anymore.
The other, since we're talking about national issues, I guess, regarding these police departments, because it hasn't been noted that we have a serious problem
No, I
with
think we have
police
a good
brutality
issue here. I think we have pretty much there's been a couple of instances that were questionable, but not with the city police.
No, but we have these national elections, and the national elections coming up, Democrat, Republican. I don't know that any of them I don't know that any of the candidates for the Republican or the Democratic Party have cogently or intelligently discussed this issue regarding Black Lives Matter, have they?
I think Bernie Sanders has been the clearest on it. That there's
Probably.
specific things that steps that he would take.
He's for the legalization of marijuana. He came out lately.
Yes.
I don't know that that's going to specifically address the problem, but he would seem to be about the only one addressing
he's
these issues.
He's against reducing incarceration. He's for more training for police officers. He's for body cameras. For if the feds have to help make it happen, he's committed to that. There's a number of things that I think he's committed to that are clearly in that direction. And
Did you see the film? I don't mean to interrupt you, but did you see the taping of the young man that was on Facebook? I guess that the young man that was shot and killed. He was a white kid.
The white kid, yes.
Yeah, that was shot and killed.
Yeah, that police officer was totally out of line, and the guy got a walk. He got a pass.
Yeah, I don't. I couldn't. Something that nobody brings up. Everybody's talking about policy, whatever. But morally, I'm going to kill I'm going to kill someone because they're driving. I'm going to shoot him in the face.
Yeah, and the reason he was let go,
I wouldn't do that. I mean, I might have punched him in the face.
He was advancing as the car was turning in front of him, and he saw that, and he continued to advance, and then got off because he says the guy was threatening his life with the car. Well, it was because he was walking into the side. He was next to the windshield when he shot the kid. He put himself in that position.
But there's an example of a young white kid that nobody's come up and said that's racist who was killed.
No, but I think it's another example of police brutality.
I won't get in.
And the issue then becomes who's most susceptible to police brutality? The group that's most prejudiced against? Well, of course.
Well, I think part of this, and I shouldn't be a nerd and talk about this, a lot of it has to do with strict liability laws that have been placed in issue. In other words, if you have something, you're responsible whether or not you intended to or not. So they've simplified all these issues. It used to be about mens rea or intent, but now it's like, hey, you're guilty. For example, you couldn't sentence someone to death for running away.
Right.
You couldn't sentence someone to death before for even burglarizing your house.
Right.
You know, and so it's, I don't know, that's some sort of a vigilante mentality. And I mean, the intent of that officer should have been looked at, I think, right?
Exactly.
And I think that was a morally, and I wanted to get into that with what some of the police officers do. And I've joked about it before, my one punch rule. Like, you lose your temper, right? Remember the famous Rodney King case?
Right.
I mean, you know, okay, you lose your temper, you hit the guy 2 or 3 times, but to keep hitting him,
Yeah, right.
15, 20 minutes, what are you, some sort of a savage?
Exactly.
You want to kill someone?
Exactly.
You know, but nobody, I think that's one of the issues. Everyone talks about policy and this and that, but I mean, the morality of killing someone,
Yes.
you know, is rather questionable. So, you know, talk about switching subjects. We have a lot of
There's a lot of local stuff going on.
local stuff going on that you're a part of, and that I'm cynical about, unfortunately.
That's all right.
The you know, playing Corpus Christi 235, and you're involved in that.
Yeah.
We're in. Everybody's getting together and planning. This is 2015. Show's been on 19 years. So I may be dead.
Right.
20. No, God forbid. but I don't know how old you are, Ben. But like,
I'm probably not
like
making
you're just not making to see the grand plan.
Right.
But what's this? I mean, talking as a working person,
Right.
which a lot of people think lawyers aren't, but working very hard. I mean, I just opened up the paper and I'm thinking, playing Corpus Christi, why don't you fix the streets? You're planning 20 years from now. Why don't you just go out there and see the streets and fix them? And you know, why, if I have a complaint about my property here and they're putting a sign up, don't they listen to that? Why are we planning ahead 20 years when we have such significant problems right now?
Well,
that would be
part
my
of the
idea.
reason we have significant problems right now is because we don't have a comprehensive development plan. We have not done a comprehensive development plan since 1984. Okay, so the city's grown tremendously without a plan, and is one of the reasons we are in the situation we are in with poor infrastructure, poor streets, because there was no comprehensive plan that forced developers and others to think about the city as a whole when they were built. So Ron Olson did what I thought was a fairly courageous thing. He had a planning department that was not going anywhere, that really had some people that were stuck in there and were not going to be able to get rid of. So he basically abolished the whole department, took the money, because he didn't feel they could do a comprehensive plan, and hired the company with the permission of the council from Boston, Goody Clancy, to do this master plan. They were selected from a number of people that bid on it. And
how much money were they paying?
$900,000 for which was the budget.
We could have had $900,000 worth of street repair.
No, you couldn't have, because that was the budget. What they did was they took the budget for the planning department that they abolished for 1 year and put it into this plan to try to come up from, basically start from zero, get a baseline and work towards up from there. All right, so that was the plan. They took a year to get public input. They had meetings in every district. They had an all-day visioning session. They had a citizens advisory board, which I was on, and there was about 50 people on that. They had 4 working committees. Then they had town halls to get feedback on the first phase before they came out with the draft report. And then they came out with the draft report, I believe it was in May. The first draft came out in May, and it was a very good plan. And people were very firm about what they wanted in the community. They said, look, no more sprawl. Fix what we've got. Take care of the streets and the infrastructure we have first. Rebuild and revitalize. That was the message from the people. That was also the message from the consultants. Oh, wow. We had about half a dozen builders that build out in the south side that want to keep expanding all the way to Kingsville. Just go over the top. Come unglued. and say,
Well,
we
Mr.
can't do that.
Well, one of them was Mr. Brazelton,
Mr.
right?
Fred Brazelton.
Because
Brazelton
I've
Homes,
seen, when I
yes.
was looking online, I saw numerous things that he was opposed to.
Yeah, he's on the planning commission, and he was pretty negative in there towards anything with bikes or any kind of
Fred Brazelton.
urban villages, anything that was different from what he does as build single-family
anything,
suburban homes.
right. Anything that would impair his ability to make money from building single-family homes, it seemed like he was opposed to.
I would say this, Mark. He's on the planning commission. He's appointed to the planning commission. He's supposed to represent all the people on the planning commission. And I would ask citizens to go through and look at his comments and make up their own mind, and then call their councilman with their opinion.
Well, I mean, here he states the majority of, this is on number 30, public comments on the
Right.
second draft of Plan Corpus Christi. I mean, it's obvious. The majority of residents live in the suburbs. Infill and revitalization cannot provide enough housing for future needs. So basically, we need to build more homes further out.
Annex,
Right.
yes. And the reality is, what the plan said was, look, we have 20,000 acres that is available, already zoned residential in the current 2014 city borders, not counting Chapman Ranch, that we can build on. That's already in the city. Half of that has infrastructure next to it, adjoining it. So we wouldn't have to extend any infrastructure out to anywhere. Mr. Brazelton wants us to annex more out where he's at, and every time we annex, your utility rate goes up,
do.
your tax rate goes up, and guess what? Did you get anything new in front of your building? No.
No.
Did you get a new street? No. Did you?
No.
But Mr. Brazelton, the
We
homes
can't-
out
we-
there have new streets.
No, and I don't know if you've ever lived like inner city where this property we're filming this show in. I don't know if you live inner city or not.
I lived in Chicago.
Well, but I mean in Corpus Christi.
Oh, well, I live in the middle. I live just down here.
Oh, do you?
Far,
Okay,
yeah.
well then you have an idea regarding some of
Yeah.
the problems that
Oh,
we
yeah.
have in the inner city infrastructure and all that.
Yeah.
The curbs are busted,
Right,
et cetera.
water mains break, sewage overflows into the stormwater system.
Okay.
You get a good rain, the toilet,
So
toilet
what-
paper comes up through.
What do you have to do with Plan Corpus Christi?
I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee, and basically we were met to review. They would take all this public input and input from 4 technical committees. They would put it into a rough draft, bring it to us as a citizens committee, and we would review it and make our pros and cons about those, and then take it back for another revision. And it went through that process several times before that first draft revision was appointed. And the planning commission, the first thing happened when it was presented, and all of these developers said, "Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Oh, no." And it's really about a handful of people, all who stand to profit from their objections to this plan. And so the city council said, "Oh, we have to put the brakes on." So they kept the goals and the objectives, but they did away with the actions and strategies. So they reduced 300 and some pages to 80 pages, gutted the document on how anything would actually be accomplished.
Right, and the goals and
Right.
objectives mean practically nothing. It's
exactly.
like
They're
Mr.
generalities.
Obama's hope and change,
Right.
or Trump's.
We'd like to have a greener city.
Right.
Whatever
Well,
that
I mean,
means.
you
It doesn't do anything. So they gutted that. The developers first got that gutted. Then they went back and they through the planning commission, which is mostly developers, they adopted a number of other things they're asking to be changed, would gut what's left. It was strongly recommended that the city grow internally, not externally. We have more than enough land for new suburbs if you want to build a suburban home. But, the people that Mr. Brazelton works with don't have land in that area and don't want to buy land in that area because they think what they think the values are. So it's all about who profits and whose ox is gored. Okay? And now they want to gut the rest. And it's just like the Chapman Ranch. Let me give you an example of annexation. Annexation, and I have to, just for so everybody knows that I do work for some of the owners of Chapman Ranch. I do some work for them. when the city decided they were going to annex the part of the Chapman Ranch to stop the wind farm, they were originally offered $13 million to leave them alone, leave everybody alone, and not annex anything. $13 million cash in their pocket for basically nothing. Had to provide no services. 4 people on the council, the mayor, Mark Scott, Lillian Riojas, and Colleen McIntyre, and at the time David Loeb, would not accept that deal and voted for annexation. Okay, they annexed 16 square miles to prevent the wind, and it's, this is 5 miles out of town. Okay.
So the city of Corpus Christi annexed how many acres?
16 square miles.
16 square miles into the city to prevent a wind farm,
Right.
Which consists of the windmills, because that was going to
Right.
block ever increasing growth of the city of Corpus
It was
Christi.
It was going to block some of the same people you're talking about that want to continue to annex to the south in Plan 2035.
Right.
Very specific group. Brazelton was against it.
But I
A lot
thought
of the developers down there were actually worked with us on an agreement that they found acceptable.
now I understand they're talking about de-annexing the Chapman Ranch.
But we
Is that
hope
right?
to see it disannexed. We hope to see that happen.
So the Chapman Ranch, is that actually like a working ranch
Yes.
with,
Yes, 32,000 acres of farmland that's being farmed.
But I'm amazed it would seem like whoever owned that property should have a say in whether or not they want to be annexed or not, right?
They didn't give the family any choice.
But I mean, wouldn't that seem to be fair? At least some sort of input.
Well, they
Look,
said
we
they-
don't want to be annexed because we're running this.
Those public hearings, they ignored the residents.
Well, let's talk about public hearings. My law office is on basically Santa Fe and Elizabeth Street, and they were going to have a public hearing down the street. They said, "Come and talk about the improvements to Santa Fe and all
Right,
this."
right.
I told my secretary, I said, "I'm not going to go over there and talk."
Right.
I said, "They already know always what they want to do."
Right.
And they're just looking for public relations to get
Right.
you on board with what they want to do. I'm not going to waste my time.
right.
Do you think I'm correct in that assessment?
I
Pretty
think
much?
that the city's tried really hard, and I've saw a major reactions to retail owners and storefront people on projects where they've adjusted projects to change things to not hurt people as much. They've made one of the major projects that they're doing now, I can't remember which one. Instead of doing the whole street at once, they're doing half of it at a time and making sure that access is still
I
available
see.
to
Well, that would be a
businesses.
good idea because
And
I think
so
there's
they put
businesses.
they put a lot of businesses out of business.
Yes, they did.
Yes,
that
they
was
did.
awful.
So
And so is this planned? Now, there's this gossip that I read. I think of it as gossip, but I kind of think of it, even though it's presented in a negative light, I think of it as a good thing regarding all this conflict on the city council. And the city of Corpus Christi is making a big deal about it regarding, is that primarily the planning commission? Or
let me go through that. Let me kind of tie it back to 2035 and this annexation of Chapman Ranch. The Chapman Ranch annexation, the city's going to have to pay $21 million worth of infrastructure and finance costs to legally annex that. They have to get out to the edge of the annexation property. And there's just a couple farmhouses out there where they're going to put it. There's nothing there. They're going to put it out Staples. And that really becomes an excuse to extend the infrastructure out Staples for people who really want to be annexed along Staples. And they only annexed 1,000 foot strip along Staples. And so any of those farm owners out there can go out there, plat that land, and say, we want to be annexed tomorrow when that sewage line is in there and tap into it. But it's going to do the people who got annexed at the end no good at all. Chapman Ranch, the 16,000 acres. Because they're just going out to some farmland and ending it. So that's not going to help them. They want to farm. They don't want to develop their land. So now the city, because they didn't get the second annexation, which they wanted to get to stop the rest of the wind farm is going in. 80% of it, 75, 80% of it's going in. But the city will get no taxes from that, which they counted on in their formula of how they were going to pay for this infrastructure was required by the state. So now the citizens of Corpus Christi are on the hook for $21 million. And when I explained this to the mayor, she turned to the assistant city manager and asked him if that was correct. He said yes. She turned to me and she says, we'll figure out a way to pay for it. So taxpayers, reach in your pockets and pull out $21 million to lay a pipeline to farmland so that the mayor can be happy. Because there's no windmills going to be built in that section. Apex has already agreed not to build any windmills there. So they won the battle, but they still want you to pay for it.
You think we have a good mayor?
I think she's a terrible mayor.
Why do you think Judge, all of a sudden, Judge Nelva, right?
Mayor
Yes.
Nelva Martinez.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why do you think she's a bad mayor?
Well, I think that she's never been a leader. I've known Nelva Martinez for a long time. She's never been a leader. You know, she's always kind of governed by this. You know, which way is the wind blowing, and especially amongst a certain group of people. Let me give you an example. When she discussed Plan 2035 last week, there was long letters from the Sierra Club, Bay Area Smart Growth, the Chapman Ranch ownership group, and a member of the Planning Commission, and the Realtors Association. And she must have mentioned the Realtors Association and their concerns about 30 times, never mentioned any other citizens or public input concerns during her whole conversation.
Well, that was her career. Her career was
Still is her career.
She still works.
She's a title company business.
She's still in the title company. I thought she was retired.
She
built.
sold it and bought it back after she was elected.
I see. What about the rest of City Council? Do you think that they're doing a good job?
I think that the 5-4 split is indicative of big change. You have the establishment that's always, that's wanted to sell you Destination Bayfront and every other half-baked idea, which consists of the mayor, Mark Scott, Lillian Riojas, who works for Valero, and Colleen McIntyre. Those are the four in the 5-4 split. The five, who I would call the reformers.
Three of the four are in real estate and
Yes.
title policies, right? All
Right.
real estate,
Right.
would benefit from that.
And the ones, the five, what I would call reformers, are Rudy Garza and Chad McGill,
Rudy's been on the show, recently.
Carolyn Vaughn, Lucy Rubio, and Brian Rosas. And they're all, three of those are newly elected in the last election. And the Caller Times is making a big deal about the 5-4 split, but they never made a big deal about it when it was a 6-3 split with Priscilla Leal and Chad and Rudy being the three out in the old council. It was never a problem then. But now the Caller Times preferred people on the council are not achieving their majority because they're doing the same old thing of favoring a special interest. That's their whole objection to the Infrastructure Street Committee. Is this Infrastructure and Street Committee is going to establish a policy by which streets are selected to be redone based on need and so on and so forth, and their scores. Not like what happened last year. Nelda Martinez Street, which was rated at a 54, just below the level where it says needed acceptability, got rebuilt. Coal. Streets that are 5, 10, 15, they're not rebuilt
before, but
they're not rebuilt.
What I find interesting about that? Let's assume that Nelda Martinez's street was rebuilt and it didn't need it because she's the mayor, which you're implying, right?
I'm just saying what it is. People can figure out what they want to believe about it. It's like I have my own opinion, but that's the facts. That's the facts. They can make up their own mind.
I'll be very frank. Where my office is and my house is, the streets are pretty nice, right? So one street in front of my house is nice. I still got to drive through the town, right?
But it adds. Mark.
What do I care?
But it adds 16% to the value of your home.
Does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you paint a pretty. And by the way, the mayor has been invited on the show, but she's never been able to come on. And she's more than happy to come on. I'd be more than happy to have her on. And we just never kind of. And some of these other city council people have been on. you know, but a lot of times they're busy on the weekend, and John always comes on, so he gets his shot.
That's right.
John always comes on and gets his shot.
Gotta be available.
That's right. And unfortunately, I have to work, so we can't do it during the week. But so you're not painting a real nice picture regarding what you think of as the intention of City Council in terms of the city of Corpus Christi, or at least it's adverse to what you think. You think that the city should not grow ever further south.
Well, we don't need to, and every time we do, every time we expand our boundaries, we have a very low density city. I mean, we're almost the size of Chicago geographically.
Right.
They have 5 million people, right? So I mean, every time we expand geographically and lower our density, your utility rate goes up, your tax rate goes up, and you get less services. Okay?
And that seems to be obvious.
Well, yes. But we have people who don't care about that because they get richer because of that. If they annex more property and they go out further and they can buy land cheaper and they can, build the infrastructure and turn it over to the city and get reimbursed back out of the reimbursement fund, that doesn't cost them. They made more money because now they sold a $250,000 home on a cheaper lot, so they got to pocket the difference.
Yeah, and I've told you about it before on the show, but I've got to say it again. That title insurance that they sell you is worthless.
It is.
It's practically speaking, you've got to buy it, but it's worthless. If you try to make a claim on it, you can't collect it. The amount of money that you collect is very minimal. So, I mean, that needs to be, someone needs to address that in the legislature at some point. Mm-hmm. I doubt that it'll ever be addressed because apparently they have a very powerful special interest lobbying group. Yeah. So what else does this plan, what else does the plan Corpus Christi, what do you think is good about it then?
I think there's a lot good about I think there's a lot of good about the first draft. Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the second draft. Right
the second draft was gutted. Okay, they took all of the, like I said, all of the strategy and actions out. So you have general policies and objectives left, which are widely open to interpretation, will be decided by some backroom committee later and passed in the dark of night, and nobody will really know what the heck's going on. So it's a total way of destroying the whole document.
Are you a member of the Bay Area Smart Growth Initiative?
Yes, I have been a member of that. I was one of the founders of that group.
Okay, and I hadn't recalled that, but it sounded like that might be an interest of yours. Mm-hmm. And also the Sierra Club seemed to have had a number of comments in this plan of Corpus Christi.
Yeah, they did.
And your interest usually, do your opinions usually coincide with the Sierra Club?
I read all of the input, and we basically have agreed on most all of the major points, and that is that the consultant and staff recommendations basically should be followed. That the planning commission changes that basically gutted the plan and saying let's annex more. And there was 2 or 3 things that basically would destroy the intent of the plan that the Planning Commission supported. And you got to remember, the Planning Commission is made up of who? Engineers and developers. They have a very specific interest for being on the Planning Commission. And commercial property owners. Those are the people who make up the Planning Commission. And they have the expertise to be on there, on the one hand, but it's very easy for them to have their, when we're talking about Plan CC 2035, to have a conflict.
What about, they talk about the Hillcrest neighborhood?
Well, I think that, the Hillcrest neighborhood it's interesting. Part of the community wants to stay there. The rest wants to be bought out. I think the practical solution, because it is a polluted area, people shouldn't be living there, if you want to know the truth.
Is the Hillcrest area, is that the black area?
Yes. But what hasn't been done is that the city, now supposedly there's some negotiations going on, but they haven't been public, or there's nothing been public about them. And the major problem is the port is the one who should be stepping up to the table and buying that property and offering a fair buyout to those people, because they're the ones going to profit. They're out of land. They can turn all of that into light industrial. and that's what it needs to be. It should not have people living on it. It's contaminated and exposed to further contamination all of the time. No child should be living in that area. But the other part of that is, as a city, we need to make a commitment to those people to create a new place for them. The thing that holds people back in Hillcrest is, regardless of how bad it is, it's a place of their own. And so we need to give people the opportunity to create a place of their own. And we should be able to do that. There's ways financially in the private sector to make that happen.
Well,
But
you
the
know,
city has to do
I've
it.
had a number of clients that were raised in that area. They call that the cut also. And, black guys around my age, and they talk about growing up rather idyllically.
Well, it's a nice, laid back,
they knew each other, right?
Community, and being cut off kind of makes it kind of special. But the problem is, Mark, it's polluted. I mean, they couldn't build when they tore down the old project over there, Leathers project or whatever it was, and wanted to rebuild it. They couldn't build it where they wanted to, besides TC Ayers, because they drilled down below the ground and there was volatile chemicals all over, right under the ground surface.
Well, has there been any studies or indication that there's a higher rate of some sort of cancer or anything
I
in
think
the area?
it's identified as a cancer hotspot. Plus, they get lots of pollution, ground level benzene pollution from the plants. That's Susie Canales has been fighting that battle. I don't always agree with Susie's statistics because they're not correct. But there is a giant plume that's proven under the whole area.
We have some of these community advocates we sometimes get. You can't always trust community advocates either, can you?
No, the problem...
Because a lot of times they're in it for their own ego or their own... I don't know what.
Well, they don't... The other problem is,
sometimes
Mark,
I'm suspicious of them.
A lot of people are community advocates who are not necessarily trained. Their heart is in the right place. Their cause may be right, but they don't have the same rules that they go by as a journalist or as a lawyer, So, if it's hearsay to them, they think they can say it's fact.
Well, that's an interesting point. I was taking it a little bit deeper. Sometimes I just think they're as bad.
Well, it's easy to get off on being in front of the microphone.
Right. It's right. It becomes an ego thing where at least even these refineries, it's a profit and a business motive.
Yes.
So they're trying, so they have a kind of an objective reference, and it's not, oh, how important I am, or whatever.
It's how much money it's going to cost us.
Well, we got the. What are you going to say? We got the refineries, and they're so great they were going to build a pipeline all the way across,
Yes.
all the way across the United States, right? I mean,
to destroy the earth.
I mean, I couldn't see that, right? I said, okay, all across Canada.
Right.
What was the story? What was that? What was the name of that pipeline?
The Keystone.
And what is the status of the Keystone pipeline?
Keystone's pretty dead right now because that heavy tar is unprofitable at this. It's
oh yeah, that changed up a lot.
$45 a barrel.
Probably even changed of the reasons we went to with fracking. It's probably changed up the
absolutely.
reasons we went to the war.
We have. There's no reason to go to war now.
So,
if we'd have fracking before, we wouldn't have had to go.
Mr.
to war.
Hope and Change Obama just took it. Mr. President Hope and Change Obama just took us to Syria.
I know, but everybody, that's an interesting. I think that's. I'll tell you what I think that is. I have actually interesting. May be interesting. You have a background. My undergraduate major is American history in the area of diplomatic history, and that force being sent there will have an operational purpose, probably as forward observers. But the big in directing airstrikes. But the big thing is. The Russians know they better not kill one of them. It's meant to say to the Russians, you need to pull back. Because if you kill an American, that's a whole nother deal. And those people are purposely put in harm's way. That's diplomacy and military strategy to say, don't go there. And I don't know if people realize that or not, but that's why those young men are so
Well,
tough.
I had thought that it might have something to
Sure
do
it
with
is.
Russia, you know.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless,
He
a lot of us
wouldn't be there
a lot-
if it wasn't for Russia.
maybe.
Not directly. Not
I
with
don't know. We're
direct-
all over.
not-
We're all
not
over the
with
Middle
people.
East.
Yeah,
Libya. I mean, what did
Absolutely.
we do to Libya? What did we do to Iraq? What did we do to Afghanistan?
Right.
What did we do to
Right.
Syria? You know.
Well, it's kind of it's when you're in a swamp and filled with alligators. It's kind of hard to forget why you're there, but you better get the hell out of the swamp.
Well, and that's what a lot of
And
us
and
would
a lot of
obviously
what we're
be
trying to do
opposed
is get out of there. Actually,
And the only
I see
candidate who's probably would do that would probably be Bernie Sanders,
Yes.
who's saying he'd get us out.
Yes.
Mr. Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
Sounds suspiciously like hope and change.
Right. Right.
You know, I mean, what does that mean? Hope and change or make America great again? I don't know that, and he's probably the leading contender. I don't think he really says for us to
Right.
get out of the Middle East in the same way that Mr. Sanders does.
No, Mr. Sanders is pretty clear. He's perfectly willing to defend the United States, but when's the last time we defended the United States with a war?
You know what's amazing is this whole, and to editorialize for a second, you know, this deal, he's a communist or he's a social, what do they call him?
He describes himself as a democratic socialist.
Democratic socialist.
Same as what is in Europe.
I mean, when did the Democratic Party change so much that a man who has the basic ideology in many respects of the old Democrats like Humphrey and Muskie and McGovern, he's a socialist? I don't see the socialist angle on him. Maybe on the health care.
Well, I think that
I don't see the socialist angle.
well, he's what he calls a democratic socialist, like the socialist in Europe. You know, they're not the socialist in terms of what you would call a Marxian socialist. Okay, which means it is a whole different ballgame. Certainly not the communists, which believe in the violent overthrow of government. What Bernie Sanders believes is that yes, we need capitalism, but capitalism needs to be controlled and tempered by humanity, and by the fact that we are one nation and that we have common things in common that we need to pay for, take care of, and first and foremost, that's each other.
Well,
that's a hard
well,
concept.
no, it's very easy, and I know that it's never intelligently discussed. But the whole issue regarding capitalism is
Right.
really an artificial construct
Absolutely.
anyway, made possible by the laws of the government,
Absolutely.
made
Capitalism-
possible by the
Right.
corporate structure,
Right.
which doesn't need to be in existence, made possible by taxation and
People don't understand if they had a totally free market, we'd go to the barter system because money would be worthless in a totally free market.
Well, you see, I know it is kind of ridiculous, But we're reaching the end of our show. We have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to hit up. You said something
Sure.
about since we mentioned the Democrats, and you wanted to talk about the Republican candidates that you thought that the Republican candidates briefly. You wanted to discuss them briefly, and I can't remember what the exact issue was.
I would just have to start by saying that I don't think there's a Republican running that's qualified to be president.
Well, you said this is what you inferred, which I agreed with. You inferred Ben Carson has no qualifications,
Right. In fact, his mental health is questionable.
and Trump has no political, governmental
Right.
qualifications whatsoever. So are the Republicans saying that our own members of our own party aren't suitable to be
Yes.
president? Isn't that the
That's
implication? Is
Well-
that because of the Tea Party or
Well, what's happened is Karl Rove succeeded too well. Karl Rove did three things to destroy the Republican Party. Number one, he created unlimited campaign financing, so that any billionaire who's a nutbag can bankroll any candidate he wants and tip the whole scale. Second, they created the values voter. People who don't care or understand politics, but they're against abortion or they're, for guns or whatever. They're one-issue voters. They tend to be not the most intelligent people in the world, not very well informed, and not understand how politics works in terms of the impact it has on their own life. they're easily susceptible to propaganda.
But I would disagree that I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would disagree that they've destroyed the Republican Party. In all honesty, they have the Senate, they have the Congress right now.
But look at the shambles it is. They can't get anything done cohesively. They can't agree amongst themselves.
Well, that is true to a certain
their
extent.
speaker. The new speaker is going to run into a buzzsaw.
Yes. What's his name? The new speaker.
If you hadn't asked me,
the younger guy. Well, he's such a mean young guy.
Yes, and the thing
he's so
from
mean.
Wisconsin.
And then he says he's a Christian. He believes in Ayn Rand.
Yeah. Well, and he said, well, I don't know if I can do this with my family, but he voted against family leave like 20 times.
Well, I don't know that I'm in favor of family leave, but when he says I want to spend more time with my family, so many of us, the average person has to work so many hours. There ain't no life.
Exactly. You can't take off if your kids are sick, for God's sake, while losing your job.
Well, to make a living, to keep up, when that includes small businessmen. Yeah. Ryan, and I don't.
Yeah.
I can't understand how anyone who states that they have Christian beliefs could actually be a fan of Ayn Rand.
You know what? Who the most competent Republican running is? Hillary Clinton.
Well,
and I would say her husband was the best Republican governor or president we've had in a long time.
I would be, if I were her, I'd rather be embarrassed by the way she's changed positions on almost all the major issues.
Every major issue.
And she, whether it's from Iraq, the war in Iraq, or homosexual marriage,
Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal.
I mean, it's kind of embarrassing that, I mean, she is a consummate politician, I would guess. Is that what?
Yes.
And
the remarkable thing is the Republicans are so screwed up they can't even follow. They're like a dog on the wrong track. They're all down the Benghazi trail, right? Well, there's nothing in Benghazi. But the real email scandal is not Benghazi. The real email scandal is those 30,000 emails that Hillary deleted that she says were private. How many of them were between her and the foundation while she was at the State Department negotiating deals, signing off on deals with Saudi Arabia? She gets $100 million or whatever it was for the foundation from Saudi Arabia, and 2 weeks later she signs off on a deal to sell them $52 billion worth of jets.
Well, if they're deleted, you can't read them.
Huh?
If they're deleted, you can't read them. That might be a more complex issue.
They're actually recovering some of those.
Well, and I think I said that too, right? Yeah. I thought all this stuff you could.
Yeah, they're working on
recover. It. So you're not a fan. You're not going to be voting for Hillary Clinton. No. If she gets a nomination, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Do you know? I predict Donald Trump will win. Because I know a number of liberals. If it was
those two people, yes, he's got a very
I know a number of liberals. I know a number of Mexican Americans, and everybody says the Mexican Americans will not vote for him. I know a number of liberals, traditional, that says if it's Hillary versus Trump, they're going to vote for Trump.
They're rejecting this, and the whole thing is a rejection of politics as usual.
Yeah, I think
that's what it is, and that's what we're looking at. So it'll be interesting. I really think that if Bernie we're somehow able to get the nomination around the power of the DNC and Hillary, he could easily walk away with the election. But Ben Carson is a threat. There's other people. Ted Cruz are a threat. And the fear is that all these millennials that are supporting Bernie, if he gets not if he just doesn't get the nomination, but he gets screwed out of the nomination by the DNC and Hillary, they won't vote. And there's a good chance a Republican could get elected.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank
Mr.
you.
John Kelly, good chance Republicans will get elected because millennials won't vote if Mr.
Bernie
Sanders
doesn't get the nomination.
Could be. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Thanks.